All right, today we're diving into the origins of the Cold War, but we're going to look at it from a really unique angle. We're using a student guide that frames this entire massive global struggle not just as a fight over territory, but as something way more fundamental, a spiritual battle between truth and deception. So let's get right into it. So here's our roadmap. We're going to walk through 5 main ideas from this guide. We'll kick things off with the big philosophical idea of truth versus deception. Then we'll see how the Iron Curtain literally split a continent. After that, we'll unpack the American strategy of containment, check out the 2 huge alliances that formed, and finally look at how financial aid was used as a major tool in this whole conflict.
Okay, so this is where our source material gets really interesting, right from the start. It doesn't begin with a battle or a political treaty. Nope, it starts with an idea, setting the stage for the whole Cold War as a philosophical, even spiritual struggle.
And bam! Right away, the guide makes a pretty bold choice. It doesn't open with a quote from a president or a general, but with one from the Bible. This tells you immediately that we're not just getting a standard history lesson here. We're being asked to see the Cold War's beginning through a theological lens, as this epic clash between what is true and what is deceptive.
And this is really the question at the absolute heart of the guide's perspective. It's not just about politics, it's trying to reframe the entire US-Soviet rivalry as a choice between 2 completely different ways of life. One that's based on truth, and another one, well, one based on deception.
So here's the crucial argument the guide is making. It's saying that the Cold War is ultimately about a struggle for power. And from this source's point of view, power itself is something that just naturally corrupts people and leads them down a path of deception. This idea is basically the key to understanding its take on everything that happens next.
So how did this whole philosophical divide actually look in the real world? Well, after World War II, this battle of ideas became a physical reality. It turned into a heavily guarded border that literally split a continent right down the middle. This was the moment the Iron Curtain came down.
You know, the term Iron Curtain, which Winston Churchill famously coined, was so much more than just a line on a map. According to this guide, it became this powerful symbol of just how deep the separation was, the intense suspicion, and the hostility that would basically define the world for the next 40-plus years. And you can see the breakdown of that division right here. You've got Western Europe, controlled by the Allies, versus Eastern Europe, occupied by the Soviets. That's what became known as the Eastern Bloc. And smack dab in the middle of it all was Germany, which was also split in 2. And then, deep inside Soviet-controlled East Germany, you have the city of Berlin, also divided, which the guide points to as a major flashpoint for conflict down the road.
Okay, so you've got this divided continent, you've got Soviet influence spreading. What was the United States supposed to do about it? Well, the source material introduces us to the central U.S. strategy for the entire era, the policy of containment.
Now, containment is a really important concept to get. As the guide lays it out, the goal wasn't to, invade and roll back communism where it already was. It was more about drawing a line in the sand. The idea was, okay, it exists in the USSR and a few other places, but we are going to do everything we can to stop it from spreading anywhere else.
And here we go again. The source connects this major geopolitical policy directly to a biblical idea. This quote is used to frame containment as more than just a political move. It's presented as a moral duty, an act of shining a light to hold back what it calls the darkness. And on this slide, the guide's whole metaphor is just laid out perfectly clear. It literally aligns the U.S. position with light, which it says represents truth, freedom, and Christian principles. And then on the other side, the Soviet position is framed as darkness, which it equates with deception and communism. According to this guide, this right here is the ideological map of the entire Cold War.
So when you have this kind of ideological showdown, this policy of containment, it's only natural that people start picking sides. And that's exactly what happened. Both sides began to form these huge military alliances for what they called collective security.
And here are the 2 big ones. On one side, you've got NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's led by the US and brings together all these Western European nations. And its core principle is simple. An attack on one is an attack on all. Then, on the other side, you have the Warsaw Pact, a Soviet-led alliance of Eastern European nations, which was kind of pitched as their version of the same idea. But, and this is a big but, the guide makes a really sharp distinction between the 2. It uses this incredibly stark phrase, a forced prison gang, to argue that the countries in the Warsaw Pact didn't really have a choice about joining. It's drawing a clear contrast with what it implies was the voluntary nature of NATO.
So how did this containment policy actually work in practice? I mean, beyond just drawing lines on a map.
The U.S. had two major strategies, and they both used aid, both economic and military, as a key weapon in the fight.
First up, we have the Marshall Plan. This was just a massive package of economic aid, billions of dollars, to help rebuild Western Europe after the war. The guide presents this as a really clever move. The thinking was, if these countries are economically strong and stable, the appeal of communism just disappears. And, once again, the source connects this policy to a biblical principle, this time linking it to generosity from the book of Proverbs. Now, if the Marshall Plan was the economic tool, the Truman Doctrine was the military one. This policy gave direct military aid to any country threatened by a communist takeover, starting with Greece and Turkey. According to the guide, the Truman Doctrine really became the bedrock of America's containment policy for decades. Okay, let's do a quick recap of the key terms from the guide, just to make sure they stick. We've got the Iron Curtain, that big symbolic divide. We've got containment, the whole strategy of stopping communism's spread. Then there's NATO, the Western military alliance, and its counterpart, the Warsaw Pact. Really getting these terms down is essential to understanding the whole setup of the early Cold War.
And so we're going to end with a question that's pulled right from the source material itself. We all know the Cold War was a struggle for global power and influence, right? But how does it change things when you look at that struggle through this very specific lens, as a battle between truth and deception? It's a really powerful question to chew on, and it perfectly sums up the unique perspective we've walked through today. Thanks for joining us.